There is a particular kind of quiet that settles over a house when two people have stopped really talking to each other. Not the easy quiet of two people comfortable in the same room. The other kind. The careful kind. Where words have become things to be measured out and stepped around. Where a whole evening can pass with nothing said, but who is picking up what and whose turn it is. And the space between you on the couch might as well be an ocean. If that quiet has moved into your home, if you lie down at night beside someone who once felt like the closest person in the world and now feels like a stranger sharing a roof, if you have started to wonder, in the dark, whether the two of you are going to make it at all, then stay with me for a while. I am not going to hand you 5 steps to fix everything by Friday, and I am not going to pretend I know the details of what has happened between you. But I do know that a marriage coming apart is one of the loneliest, most frightening griefs a person can carry, and that you are probably carrying it where almost no one can see. So let us be honest about it, for once, out loud, and then let us look at what God says to people standing exactly where you are standing, and at the true stories of some who stood there too, in the Bible and in our own day, and found that the end they were braced for was not the end after all. Maybe you are listening to this somewhere you can be alone, because this is not a thing you can play out loud in your own kitchen. Maybe the person on the other side of the wall has no idea you are sitting here, looking for some word of hope about the two of you. Maybe you have already half decided how this ends, and you are only here because some stubborn ember in you is not quite gone cold, some small part that still wants to be told it might not be over. However you came to be listening, you are welcome here, and you do not have to perform anything, or be further along than you are, or pretend the hope is stronger than it feels. We are just going to sit honestly with a hard thing for a while, and let some light into a room that has been dark for a long time. Let me say first what you may need to hear before anything else. The fact that this is breaking your heart is not a small thing or a weak thing. It is the sign of something that was, and maybe still is, real. People do not grieve what they never valued. The very depth of the ache you feel at the thought of losing this is the measure of how much it once meant, and perhaps still means. And there is something in that worth paying attention to before you let go of all of it. Now let me try to name what these days have actually been like. Because the loneliness of a hurting marriage is a specific and crushing loneliness. And most people walking through it feel they are the only ones. It is the loneliness of being lonely next to someone. Anyone can be lonely in an empty house, but to be lonely in a full one, to reach for connection across the dinner table or the bed and find only distance where there used to be warmth, that is a colder thing. You are not alone, and yet you have never felt more alone. And the person who is supposed to be your refuge has become the source of the ache. It is the same argument, running on a loop. You have had this fight so many times, you could perform both parts of it in your sleep. It starts over something small, the dishes, the money, the tone of a single word, and within minutes, you are both standing in the same old trenches you have stood in 100 times, saying the same wounding things, arriving at the same dead end, and walking away more certain than before that nothing will ever change. The exhaustion of fighting the same battle over and over, with no ground ever won, wears a person down to the bone. It is the wall that has gone up between you, brick by brick, so slowly that you cannot point to the day it appeared. Each unaddressed hurt laid a brick. Each swallowed resentment laid another. The thing said in anger that was never taken back, the disappointment never spoken. The slow accumulation of small betrayals and large ones, until one day you looked up and there was a wall there, and you could barely see each other over the top of it. And underneath the wall, the keeping of score. The ledger you did not mean to start, where every wound they gave you is written down and remembered, and where, if you are honest, you have stopped fighting for the marriage and started fighting to win, to be the one who was right, to make them feel what you have felt. Two people keeping score is two people slowly bleeding the same wound from opposite sides. And the cruelest part of the loop is how the fight stops being about whatever started it. You begin arguing about the dishes, or the money, or who is supposed to call whom. But within a few sentences, you are not really arguing about any of that. You are arguing about every unhealed thing underneath it. Every old wound the new one brushed against. And the other person cannot understand why such a small thing has set off such a large storm, because they cannot see the years of buried hurt the small thing just landed on. So you both walk away baffled and exhausted, each convinced the other is unreasonable, neither of you having touched the real thing at all, which lies too deep and too tender to be reached in the heat of a fight. And you brace yourself, all ready for the next time. Because you both know there will be a next time, and it will go exactly the same way. There is a grief in remembering, too. You remember the two people who stood at the front of that room and promised each other everything, who could not keep their hands apart, who stayed up half the night talking and could not imagine ever running out of things to say. And you look at the two of you now, careful and tired and far apart, and you wonder where those two people went, and whether they are gone for good. The memory of how it was does not warm you. It just measures how far you have fallen from it. The touching stopped somewhere along the way, and you may not even remember when. The hand that used to find yours across the console of the car, the easy press of a shoulder passing in the kitchen, the warmth of another body in the night that you once took completely for granted. Now there is a careful gap down the middle of the bed, an invisible line neither of you crosses. Two people lying back to back in the dark, each pretending to be asleep, each aware the other is awake. The body keeps a record the heart will not say out loud, and the long absence of an ordinary touch can ache more than any argument. And you have started to brace yourself before you walk through your own front door. The breath you take in the driveway before you go in, the quick reading of the air the moment you step inside to gauge what kind of evening it will be, which version of them you are coming home to. A home is supposed to be the place your shoulders come down, when it has become the place they go up, when you feel more at ease anywhere else than in the house you share. Something in you grieves that loss almost more than anything, because you remember when that door meant safety, and now you are not sure what it means. Some of you have gone past the fighting into something quieter and colder, which is its own kind of warning. You do not even argue anymore. You have stopped expecting to be understood, stopped bothering to explain, stopped hoping the conversation could go anywhere good. And so you have simply gone numb, two polite strangers managing a household. And the numbness frightens you more than the fighting ever did, because at least the fighting meant you still cared enough to try. And so often, none of this happened because either of you set out to wreck anything. It happened while you were busy surviving. The money was tight, and the worry over it seeped into everything, until you were no longer two people in love, but two people stressed about bills, snapping at each other over numbers. The jobs took more than they gave back, and you came home empty, with nothing left over for the one person who needed the best of you, and kept getting the worst. The children. Or the aging parents, or the 1,000 obligations of an ordinary life, filled every hour, until the marriage that was supposed to be the center of it all became the thing you tended last, after everything else. with whatever scraps of energy remained, which was usually none. Add in the in-laws, the old family wounds each of you dragged in without knowing it, the expectations neither of you ever said out loud, but both of you quietly resented the other for not meeting. And you have the slow, ordinary recipe by which good people who once adored each other end up as strangers. It is no one's grand betrayal. It is the steady erosion of a thing left untended in a demanding world. And the strange comfort in that is this: what was eroded slowly can, with care, be rebuilt slowly. What drifted apart by inches can be drawn back together the same way. Maybe there are children in the house, and so a whole second fear sits on top of the first. The fear of what this is doing to them, of what they hear through the walls, of what it would do to them if it all came apart. Maybe you are staying, white-knuckled, for their sake, and wondering how long you can hold a thing together that keeps trying to fall. Maybe you lie awake doing the terrible math of it, weighing a broken home against a home full of Cold War, and finding no answer that does not cost the people you love the most. And there is a quieter worry underneath that one, if you let yourself look at it. The fear that whatever the two of you are modeling right now is the picture of marriage your children are absorbing, the template they will carry into their own loves someday. The cold silences, the careful avoidance, the way two people can share a house and a history and still be strangers. All of it is being learned by small eyes that miss nothing. That is not said to heap guilt on you. You are carrying enough. It is said because it is one more reason the fight for a marriage is worth fighting. When it can be fought, not only for the two of you, but for the ones watching, who are learning from you what love is supposed to look like, and who would learn something good and lasting from watching two people refuse to quit on each other. And almost no one knows. That may be the heaviest part, because you smile in the lobby on Sunday, and you answer fine when people ask, and you let them go on believing the two of you are solid, while inside the walls of your own home, something is dying, and you cannot say a word about it to anyone. The shame of a marriage that is failing, especially when you are the people others come to for hope, can seal you into a silence so complete that you carry the whole weight of it alone. And the silence does its own damage on top of everything else. Because when you cannot tell anyone, you also cannot be helped by anyone. And you start to believe the lie that you are the only couple in the building whose marriage is quietly crumbling, when the truth is that some of those smiling couples in the next pew are carrying the very same secret you are. The performance is exhausting. The keeping up of appearances, the bright answers, the not letting the mask slip. All of it takes energy you do not have. Energy that should be going into the actual marriage and is instead going into hiding its true condition. There is a strange loneliness in being surrounded by people who love you and not being able to let a single one of them near the thing that is breaking your heart. For some of you, the wound has a sharper name. There was a betrayal, an affair, a discovery that split your life into before and after, and you are trying to figure out whether trust that shattered like that can ever be rebuilt, or whether you even want to try. If that is your wound, you know a devastation words can barely hold. The ground you stood on for years turns out to have been something else. Memories you treasured get rewritten in an instant, and you go back over them wondering what was real and what was a lie. And you look at the person you trusted more than anyone and feel as though you were looking at a stranger wearing their face. The betrayal is bad enough. The aftershock, the not knowing, the sudden distrust of your own judgment can be worse. And whether or not the marriage survives, that wound is real, and it deserves to be grieved honestly and healed slowly. never waved away by anyone who tells you to just get over it. For some, it is not one great wound, but 1,000 small ones, a slow drifting apart until you woke up next to a person you no longer know. For some, it is an addiction that has hollowed out the home, or words that have grown cruel, or a coldness that has lasted so long you have forgotten what warmth felt like. The shapes are different. The ache is the same. And there is the particular grief of the future you planned together. You built a whole life in your imagination, the years ahead, the growing old side by side, the plans you made for places you would go and things you would do when the busy years were behind you. And now that future flickers, and you do not know if it is still there. And grieving a future is a strange and lonely thing, because you are mourning something that has not even happened, a loss no one else can see. The two people who were supposed to walk all the way to the end together may not, and the road you were so sure of has gone foggy ahead of you. And maybe, in the worst moments, your mind has wandered somewhere it frightens you to admit. To the thought of being free of it, to some other life, some easier love, some version of your days without this constant weight. Maybe you have caught yourself imagining the relief of simply walking away, and then felt the guilt crash in behind the thought. You are not a monster for having had it. A heart under this much strain reaches for any exit it can picture, but the imagining scares you, because it tells you how tired you have become, and how far the two of you have drifted from the place where leaving was unthinkable. And then there is the question you ask God in the dark, if you still talk to him at all. Did I fail at this too? Is he disappointed in me? I stood in his house and made vows in his name, and now I cannot keep them from coming apart. And I do not know whether he is angry, or grieved, or simply done with me. Is this one broken thing too broken even for him? So, before we go any further, let me speak to that last question, because everything else stands on the answer. God is not standing across the room from your marriage with his arms folded, waiting to see if you will fail. The God we are talking about is the one who thought marriage up in the first place, who stood in a garden at the beginning and said it was not good for the man to be alone, who has watched over every couple who ever loved and fought and wept and tried again. He is not far from the wreckage in your living room. He is closer to it than you are, and he is not finished. And whatever happens, you are not going to face it alone. And let me take the weight of that other fear off you. The fear that you have disappointed him by failing at this. God is not surprised by a hard marriage. He has watched his own people break faith with him more times than there are stars, and he has never once responded by writing them off. If anyone understands the particular grief of loving someone who has grown distant, of keeping faith with a partner who has stopped keeping it back, it is God. Because that is the exact story of his own heart toward us, told on every page of the book. He is not looking down on your struggle from a great, clean height. He has been in it himself. The longing, the patience, the heartbreak, the going on loving when love is not returned. He meets you in this, not as a disappointed judge, but as the one person in all the universe who knows from the inside exactly what you are feeling. Hear what marriage actually is, in his eyes, because it will help you understand why this hurts the way it does. When God joined the first two people, he said something staggering, that a man would leave his father and mother and be joined to his wife, and the two of them would become one flesh. One flesh. Not two people in a business arrangement. Not two roommates splitting the rent. but two lives grown together into one. And that is why the coming apart of a marriage is not like the ending of any other relationship. It does not feel like a contract dissolving. It feels like a tearing, like something being ripped that had genuinely grown together, because that is exactly what it is. The pain you are in is not a sign that something is wrong with you. It is a sign of how real the joining was. You do not bleed like this over something that never became part of you. It helps to understand this, because the world will tell you a marriage is just a contract, a legal arrangement two adults enter and can exit, like a lease or a partnership, and that ending one should be no more wrenching than dissolving a business. But you know in your body that is a lie, because no business partnership ever felt like this when it ended. Two lives that have grown together grow roots into each other, roots that wind through your days, your memories, your habits, your sense of who you are. Pulling those roots apart tears tissue that was genuinely alive. That is not weakness on your part. And it is not you failing to be modern and reasonable about it. It is you being honest about what a marriage actually is. And it is worth letting that honesty cut both ways. If the joining was real enough to hurt this much in the tearing, then it was real enough to be worth a hard look at whether it must be torn at all. And remember who was there on the day it began. When the two of you stood and made those promises, you were not only making them to each other, there was a third party present, a witness to every word. The God in whose name the vows were spoken. He heard them. He has not forgotten them, even on the nights the two of you have. And that means the covenant you made has a keeper outside of yourselves. Someone invested in it who was there at the start and is still here now, in the hard middle, who takes your vows more seriously than perhaps you do, and who has a stake in their being kept. You are not the only one in the room who wants to see this marriage survive. The one who joined you is for it too, and he brings to the rescue a power neither of you possesses. I tell you that not to deepen the wound, but to honor it, and to point you toward a hope hidden inside it. Because the same God who made two people into one is in the business of mending things that have torn, and he is not intimidated by how far gone yours feels. There is an image in the scriptures that has held up hurting marriages for thousands of years, and it is worth sitting with. The wise man wrote that two are better than one, because when one falls, the other can lift him up, and that if two lie down together, they keep each other warm, and that where one alone can be overpowered, two can stand. And then he adds a strange and beautiful line. A threefold cord is not quickly broken. A threefold cord. Not a cord of two strands, but three. Think about what that means for a marriage. Two strands, twisted together, are stronger than one. But under enough strain, two strands can still pull apart. They fray against each other. They come unwound. But weave in a third strand, and something changes. The cord holds where two alone would have snapped, and the third strand in a marriage is God Himself. So much of what fails in a marriage fails because it has become a thing of two strands only. Two people turned toward each other, demanding from each other what no human being can fully give, with nothing holding them but their own stretched and fraying love. The missing strand is so often the very thing that could have held. This is not said to blame you. It is said to give you hope, because it means there is a strand still available to you, a strength you may not yet have woven in, and it is never too late to begin weaving it. And notice the quiet wisdom in the picture. The third strand does not replace the other two. It does not do their work for them. The two of you still have to be there, still have to choose each other, still have to do the daily work of staying twined together. But the third strand changes what the other two are capable of holding. A weight that would snap two strands is held easily by three. A strain that pulls two people apart can be borne when there is someone holding them both. So many couples exhaust themselves trying to be everything to each other, to be the other's whole source of life and security and meaning, and they fail. Not because they love too little, but because they are asking of each other a thing only God was ever meant to give. When the weight of your spouse's whole soul rests on you alone, you will buckle, and so will they. But when each of you leans first on God, you stop crushing each other with a burden neither of you was built to carry, and the marriage can finally breathe. And look again at the rest of what the wise man said, because it is a picture of what a marriage held by three strands can be. If they fall, he said, the one will lift up his fellow. Not if they fall, but when. Because in any real marriage there will be falling, seasons when one of you is flat on the ground, weak, failing, unable to stand. And the gift of a true marriage is that you are not down there alone. There is a hand reaching to lift you. And on the day it is your spouse who falls, there is your hand to lift them. And if two lie together, he said, they keep warm. The cold of this world is real, and it is a mercy past calculating to have one person to be warm beside through all of it. The marriage you are grieving was meant to be that, two people lifting and warming each other through a hard and cold world, held together by a third strand stronger than both. That is worth fighting for. That is worth fighting through a great deal to get back. Let me tell you a true story from the scriptures about a marriage, and I warn you, it is a hard and strange one. Because God chose the hardest possible marriage to show us the deepest possible love. There was a prophet named Hosea, and God asked him to do something almost unthinkable. He told Hosea to marry a woman named Gomer, telling him in advance that she would be unfaithful to him. And she was. She bore him children and then went chasing after other lovers and broke his heart and left and sank lower and lower until she ended up in the most degraded place a person could end up, owned, sold, used. By every standard the world has ever held, that marriage was over. She had forfeited every claim on him. No one would have blamed Hosea for being done. And then God said something to him that is one of the most astonishing sentences in all of Scripture. He said, "Go yet, love a woman, an adulteress, the way the Lord loves the children of Israel, even when they turn to other gods. Go yet, go again, go back after all of it, and love her still." And Hosea did. He went and found her in her ruin, and he bought her back, paid the price to redeem her out of the pit she had fallen into, and brought her home and loved her. Now, hear me carefully, because this story has been misused, and I will not misuse it. God was not telling Hosea, and he is not telling you, that love means letting yourself be destroyed, or that a wife or a husband is obligated to stay in danger, or to keep absorbing abuse, or to pretend a betrayal never happened. We will come back to that because it matters. The point of Hosea's marriage was never to be a rule book for yours. The point was to be a window. Through that one prophet's heartbreak, God was showing the whole world how he loves. He was saying, "This is what my love is like. I love the unfaithful. I pursue the one who ran. I go yet. I go again. I pay the price to buy back what was lost. I love past the point where every reasonable person would have quit. Stay with the strangeness of that for a moment. Because we have heard the word love so worn down and sentimental that we miss how fierce this is. The God of all the universe, who needs nothing and owes us nothing, looks at people who have taken everything he gave and spent it on other things, who have broken faith again and again, and instead of the cold justice they have earned, he says, "Go and buy her back." He pays. That is the shocking center of it. Real love, the divine kind, is not a feeling that floats above the wreckage. It is a price that gets paid down in the wreckage. Hosea went down into the place where his wife had been sold, and he counted out the silver, and he purchased back the very person who had broken his heart. It cost him. Love that costs nothing is not the love that mends marriages or saves souls. The love that does is the kind willing to go down into the low place and pay. And there is a quiet hope in the story for anyone whose marriage was broken by unfaithfulness, though I offer it carefully. Gomer, the one who ran, the one who shattered every vow, did not stay in the pit. She was found and redeemed and brought home, and the marriage was not erased by the betrayal, but somehow restored beyond it. That does not mean trust is rebuilt in a day, or that the betrayed should simply pretend the wound away, or that staying is always the right or safe path. Because sometimes it is not. But it does mean that betrayal, even betrayal, is not automatically the end of a story God is writing. There are marriages alive and well today, tender and honest and deeper than they ever were before, that came through the exact wreckage you may think is unsurvivable. Because two people were willing to do the slow, painful, holy work of rebuilding on the far side of a broken vow, with God's relentless love holding them both. It is hard, it is not guaranteed, but it is not impossible, and the God of Hosea has done it more times than you know. And that is the love that is available to you tonight, whatever is happening in your marriage. Because before you are a husband or a wife, you are loved like that, by God, relentlessly, redemptively, past your failures and past your running. You did not earn it, and you cannot lose it. And here is why that matters for your marriage. A person who knows, deep down, that they are loved like that, has a well to draw from that never runs dry. So much of what poisons a struggling marriage is two empty people demanding that the other fill them, when neither has anything left to give. But a person who is being filled by the relentless love of God can begin to love out of the overflow instead of out of the lack. The love your marriage needs may be a love neither of you can manufacture, but it is a love God has in infinite supply, and He pours it into the ones who come to Him empty. This is the piece almost everyone misses when a marriage is dying. We treat the marriage as the deepest well, the place we go to be filled, to be told we matter, to be made to feel chosen and safe and loved. And when that well runs dry, we panic, because we think it was the only water there was. But your spouse was never meant to be the deepest well. No human being can be. Put the full weight of your soul's thirst on another flawed and finite person, and you will drain them dry and still be thirsty. And they will do the same to you. There is only one well that does not run out, and it is the relentless, redeeming love of God. And the more you drink from it, the less desperately you need to wring every drop of life from a spouse who simply cannot be your everything. People who are deeply loved by God make far better marriage partners, not because they need their spouse less, but because they need them in a healthier way, freed from the impossible demand to be God. Go to the well that does not run dry. Drink there first. Then you will have something to bring home. Let me step gently aside for just a moment. I know that many of you are listening to this with the bedroom door closed, or in the car in a parking lot. Somewhere you can be alone with a thing you cannot say to anyone in your life. If that is you, you can leave one word in the comments, just the word praying, so that it is said somewhere, even anonymously, even to strangers, and so that you know you are not the only one carrying this tonight. There are more of you than you would ever guess. Now let me show you what real love actually looks like, because we have been lied to about it. We grew up on a story about love that has quietly wrecked a great many marriages. The story says that love is a feeling that happens to you, that the right person makes it effortless, that if you have to work this hard, then something must be wrong, that when the spark fades, the love is gone, and it is time to go find it again with someone new. It is everywhere, in the songs, in the films, in the air we breathe, and almost none of it is true. It sets people up to expect a permanent honeymoon, and then to panic when ordinary life arrives. To mistake the fading of a feeling for the death of a marriage. To go looking for the next rush instead of the deeper thing that only grows in the soil the rush leaves behind. So, before we go any further, it is worth tearing that lie up by the roots and replacing it with the truth. Because what you believe love is will quietly decide what you do when your marriage gets hard. There is a passage read at almost every wedding, so familiar that the words slide right past us. But hear them from inside a hard marriage instead of from a flower-filled church, and they land very differently. Love, it says, suffers long and is kind. Love does not envy, does not boast, is not easily provoked, keeps no record of wrongs. Love bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. And then, the line that holds the whole thing up. Love never fails. Notice what is not in that description. It does not say love feels constant butterflies. It does not say love is always warm, always easy, always sure. Every single thing that passage says about love is something love does, not something love feels. Suffers long, bears, believes, hopes, endures. These are not feelings that wash over you. They are choices you make, often against your feelings, sometimes through gritted teeth, on the days when the warmth is nowhere to be found. We were sold a counterfeit, a love that is only a feeling, and so when the feeling fades, as every feeling does, we conclude the love is gone and the marriage is dead. But the love that holds a marriage was never mainly a feeling. It is a costly, stubborn, chosen thing. And the remarkable promise tucked into that passage is that this kind of love never fails. It outlasts the dry seasons. It can be chosen again on the far side of the worst night. And it is, in the end, less something you fall into than something you decide, daily, to do. And hold on to that promise the whole passage is built to deliver. Love never fails. Everything else in this world fails eventually. Feelings fail, strength fails, patience fails, the best intentions fail. But the love God describes, the love God Himself is, does not fail. And when you love with His love, drawn from His endless supply rather than your own thin reserves, you are working with the one thing in the universe that cannot finally be defeated. That does not mean every marriage survives, because a love that never fails can still meet a will that refuses it. But it does mean that love poured into your marriage is never wasted, never lost, never returns to you empty, even when you cannot yet see what it is doing. You're not throwing your love into a void. You are planting it in ground tended by a God whose own love has never failed once, and who knows how to bring a harvest out of soil that looks, for now, like nothing but dirt. The feelings, by the way, often come back. Couples who have walked through a long, cold stretch and out the other side will tell you that the warmth returned, not because they waited for it, but because they kept doing the actions of love until the feelings caught up. Feelings follow actions far more reliably than the other way around. You will not always feel your way into better acting, but you can very often act your way into better feeling. There is freedom in this, if you will take it. Because if love were only a feeling, then a marriage would be entirely at the mercy of something you cannot control. You cannot command a feeling to appear. You cannot make yourself feel the old butterflies on demand, any more than you can make yourself feel hungry right after a meal. If the marriage depended on the feeling, you would be helpless. But love as the Scripture describes it, love as a thing you do, suffering long, being kind, bearing, enduring, refusing to keep score, that you can begin tonight, regardless of how you feel, regardless even of whether you feel anything at all. You can speak the gentle word with a cold heart and watch what it does. You can choose the patient response when everything in you wants the cutting one. The doing is within your reach even when the feeling is nowhere to be found. And again, the feeling turns out to have been hiding just behind the doing, waiting for someone to go first. Let me bring you a true story from our own time now. An ordinary couple, not saints in stained glass, just two people who nearly lost it all. His name is Dave, and hers is Anne, and they had been married about 10 years when it nearly ended. From the outside, things looked good. He was living his dream, working with a professional football team, helping start a church, a man on the rise, busy and admired, and gone a great deal. And at home was Anne, raising their 3 young boys mostly by herself, feeling more and more invisible, more and more alone, while her husband chased a calling that kept him away. The resentment built in her the way it builds, quietly, brick by brick, while he was too caught up in his own momentum to see it. For their 10th anniversary, he decided to do it upright. He planned a night of romantic surprises, a nice restaurant, the kind of evening they never spent money on, determined to be the romantic husband. And it fell completely flat. Because somewhere in that evening, Anne finally told him the truth of where she was, and it was nothing like where he thought they were. The distance between his picture of their marriage and her reality of it was so wide that the whole carefully planned night collapsed, and they came face to face with the fact that their marriage was in serious trouble. By their own account, divorce no longer felt impossible. It felt like where they were heading, but that terrible night became the turning point, and here is how. They came to see that they had been trying to make their marriage work on the horizontal level only, the two of them, face to face, each looking to the other to meet needs and fill holes that the other simply could not fill. What was missing was the vertical. Neither of them had been bringing their own broken, demanding heart to God first, letting Him do the deep work and fill the deep need, before turning to each other. When they began to get that order right, when each of them started going up to God before going across to each other, everything slowly began to change. It did not happen overnight, but that couple who nearly divorced at 10 years went on to be married for more than 40 and spent the rest of their lives helping other couples find the same thing they almost missed. What strikes me most about their story is how ordinary the breakdown was. There was no single villain, no dramatic betrayal, just two people who had drifted into a slow, mutual blindness. He could not see how alone he had left her, too caught up in the good and even godly things he was building, to notice the person he was building them next to. She could not find a way to say what she needed that did not land on him as criticism, and he heard the criticism and missed the loneliness underneath it. They were not bad people, and they were not even, by most measures, a bad couple. They were two human beings, expecting each other to fill a space only God could fill, and slowly starving while each waited for the other to do it first. That is how most marriages come apart, not with a single blow, but with 1,000 small turnings away, until one ordinary anniversary dinner, the distance finally finds its voice. And what turned it around was not that they suddenly got better at marriage. It was that each of them stopped going to the other one first for the thing only God could give, and started going up before going across. That quiet reordering is available to anyone, in any marriage, at any stage of the falling apart. You do not have to mend the whole thing tonight. You only have to begin to get the order right. I do not tell you their story to promise you that your marriage will look like theirs, because I cannot promise that, and I will not pretend to. Every marriage is different, and some of them, despite real effort, do not survive. And we will get to that honestly in a moment. I tell you their story because it shows you something true, that a marriage can look finished and not be finished, that the night it all seems to collapse can turn out to be the night it begins to heal, and that the missing piece is so often the vertical strand, the God who was waiting all along to be woven into a cord that two people had been trying to hold together on their own. So let me speak to the things that despair has been telling you about your marriage, because some of them are simply not true. It tells you it is too far gone, past saving, dead. But the God we are talking about is in the habit of raising dead things. He is not daunted by a marriage that looks like a corpse. Resurrection is the thing he is most famous for. Hopelessness feels like clear sight when you are in it, but it is not sight at all. You cannot see what God may yet do from inside the worst of it, any more than Hosea could see Gomer coming home. Any more than that couple at their ruined anniversary dinner could see 40 more years. Despair is a poor prophet. It speaks with total certainty about a future it cannot actually see, and that has been confidently wrong about countless marriages that went on to outlive the very night someone was sure they were over. Some of the strongest, deepest, most tender marriages you will ever encounter are ones that came within a hair of ending, that walked right up to the edge and somehow stepped back. And the people in them will tell you they can hardly believe now how close they came to throwing away what became the great gift of their lives. You are not in a position to see your own ending from where you stand tonight, in the dark, in the pain. What you can see is the next step. Leave the ending to God, who has rebuilt more ruins than you could count. It tells you that because the feeling is gone, the love is gone. But you have heard now that the love a marriage runs on was never mainly a feeling, and that feelings, astonishingly, can be rekindled in soil that looked completely dead. Cold love is not always dead love. Sometimes it is only sleeping and waiting for someone to begin again to do the things that wake it. Every long marriage has winters. The couples who have been married 50 years did not feel 50 years of butterflies. They walked through cold stretches you know nothing about. Seasons where one or both of them wondered if the warmth was gone for good. And they kept tending the marriage through the frost until spring came around again, as it has a way of doing for those who do not give up on the ground in the middle of January. What feels to you like the permanent death of love may be, in truth, a season, and seasons turn. The mistake is to read winter as the end of the world and tear out the whole garden, when what was needed was only to keep it alive through the cold and wait for the light to come back. It tells you that you must have married the wrong person, that the whole thing was a mistake from the start. But there is no person so right that marriage to them is easy, and no marriage so mistaken that God cannot redeem it. The grass that looks greener is somebody else's field, with weeds you cannot see from here. The question was never whether you married the perfect person. No one did. The question is what God can do with the marriage you actually have. There is a fantasy that quietly poisons more marriages than almost anything, and it is the belief that somewhere out there was, or is, the right person, the one with whom all of this would have been easy, and that your mistake was simply ending up with the wrong one. But that person does not exist. Every marriage, without exception, is the union of two flawed, selfish, wounded human beings who will inevitably disappoint each other. And the couple who looks effortless from the outside is simply further down the road of learning to love a real person instead of an imagined one. The work you are avoiding by dreaming of someone easier is the very same work you would face with anyone. Because the work is not really about finding the right person. It is about becoming the right person and learning to love the actual human being in front of you. There is no escape from that work into a fantasy where love requires nothing. There is only the choice to do it here, with the person you actually married, and to discover that a love which has survived disappointment is deeper than one that never met any. And it tells you that you have to carry this in secret, that you must keep wearing the fine on Sunday and never let anyone see. That lie may be the most dangerous of all, because a marriage dies fastest in the dark. So let the light in. Find one trustworthy person, a pastor, a wise friend, a good counselor, and tell the truth about where you are. There is no shame in a couple needing help. The shame would be in letting pride keep you silent until it is too late. Some of the strongest marriages you know were rebuilt by people humble enough to sit in a counselor's office and say, "We cannot do this alone." Now I have to say something plainly, and I want you to hear it clearly, because love that only ever says, "Fight for it," would not be honest love. There is one situation where the first word is not stay and fight, and that is where there is abuse. If your spouse is harming you, if there is violence, if you or your children are in danger, then please hear this. God does not call you to stay in harm's way. And keeping the marriage covenant was never meant to mean offering your body and your safety to be broken. The God who loves you does not require you to be destroyed. If that is your situation, the most faithful thing you can do is get to safety and get help today. Tell someone. Reach out to a pastor you trust, or a counselor, or a hotline in your country that helps people in danger. Honoring marriage and protecting your life are not opposites. And no one who truly speaks for God will tell you otherwise. And I have to be honest about something else, for the sake of those who need to hear it. You can do everything right, and a marriage can still end. because it takes two to rebuild and only one to leave. If your marriage has not survived, or does not, despite everything you poured into it, hear this and let it sink all the way in. You are not a failure, and you are not a lesser Christian, and you are not outside the love of God. He is not done with you. The same relentless love that pursued an unfaithful woman through the book of Hosea pursues you in your divorce, in your grief, in your fear of the future. And there is no version of your story He cannot redeem and rebuild. If that is where you are, the gentleness in everything I have said tonight is for you too, fully. And I want to say one more thing, quietly, to anyone who needs it. The collapse of a marriage can press down on a person with a weight that gets hard to bear. And if the grief and the fear and the loneliness have grown so heavy that part of you has begun to wonder whether you can go on at all, whether anyone would even miss you, then please hear me. That weight is lying to you about your worth and about your future, and you do not have to carry it by yourself for one more night. Tell someone. Reach out today to a friend, a pastor, a doctor, a counselor, a helpline in your country. Your life is not defined by what is happening in your marriage, and it matters more than the darkness will let you feel right now. And there are people who can help carry this with you. You are not a burden. Reaching for help is not weakness. It is the bravest and most faithful thing you can do. So what do you do if your marriage is still standing and you want to fight for it? Not a formula, just a few honest things. Start with a strand you can actually reach, which is your own. You cannot make your spouse change. You can only bring your own heart to God and let Him begin there. It is humbling, because every fiber of you wants to fix the other person, to win the argument about who is more to blame. But the one end of this you can actually take hold of is your own. And the surprising thing is how often a marriage begins to thaw when one person stops waiting for the other to move first and quietly lets God go to work on their own heart. This feels unfair when you first hear it, and I understand why. Why should you be the one to move when so much of this was not your doing? Why should you do the work of changing while they sit unchanged? But hear the freedom hidden in it. As long as your hope hangs entirely on your spouse changing, you are powerless, a prisoner of someone else's choices, waiting forever for a door only they can open. The moment you take hold of your own end, your own heart, your own walk with God, your own half of the distance, you stop being a prisoner. You may not be able to move them, but you can move. And movement on one end of a frozen thing has a way of loosening the whole. This is not about being a doormat or pretending the wrongs against you do not count. It is about refusing to let your own growth, your own peace, your own nearness to God be held hostage to another person's choices. Tend your own strand. It is the one you can reach. And make that tending a daily, ordinary practice, not a one-time dramatic decision. The couple whose marriage came back from the brink described a habit as simple as this, beginning each morning by handing the day and the marriage and their own demanding heart back to God before their feet hit the floor. Father, I give you my life again today. Fill me so I have something to give. It is small, and it does not feel like much, and it is the kind of quiet, repeated turning that slowly changes everything. Because a heart filled fresh each morning by the love of God walks into the kitchen with something it did not have the night before. It is harder to keep the wall up, harder to reach for the old weapons, harder to demand from your spouse what you have just received from God, when you have started the day at the well that does not run dry. You will not do it perfectly. You will forget and snap and have to come back. But the steady, daily going up before the going across is the most powerful thing you can do for a marriage, and it is entirely yours to do, no matter what the other person chooses. Pray for your spouse instead of only praying about them. There is a difference, and you will feel it. It is hard to keep a wall up against someone you are sincerely carrying to God. Praying for the very person who has hurt you softens something in you that no amount of being right ever could, and it invites God to work in places you have no power to reach. And pray for your own eyes, too, not just your spouse's heart. Ask God to let you see the person you married the way He sees them, underneath the years of hurt and habit and disappointment, the way you once saw them when everything was new. It is astonishing how much of what divides a couple is not the other person as they actually are, but the case we have slowly built against them in our own minds, the file of grievances we keep adding to, the worst possible reading of every word and silence. Ask God to dismantle that file. Ask Him to show you the frightened, tired, longing human being on the other side of the wall, who is very likely as lonely and as scared as you are, and who may simply not know how to find the way back any more than you do. Put down the ledger. The scorekeeping that feels like justice is slowly killing whatever is left. Because love, the real kind, keeps no record of wrongs. You do not have to pretend the wounds did not happen, but you can stop nursing them, stop rehearsing them, stop reaching for them like weapons in every fight. Forgiveness is not saying it did not matter. It is deciding to stop making them pay for it forever. This is some of the hardest work a wounded person ever does, and I will not pretend it is simple, especially where the wound was deep. Forgiveness does not mean the betrayal did not matter, or that trust is rebuilt overnight, or that there are no consequences and no hard conversations still to be had. It is not pretending. It is something more like setting down a stone you have been carrying so long your hand has cramped around it. You do not set it down for their sake, mostly. You set it down for your own. Because a heart clenched around its grievances cannot also be open to love. And the bitterness you are nursing to punish them is mostly poisoning you. Bring the wounds to God, who is the only one who can carry them properly. And let Him be the judge so that you do not have to keep being the prosecutor. Vengeance is a weight He has offered to take off your hands. Let Him have it. Do the small things, the unglamorous ones, the soft answer instead of the sharp one, the kind act that you do not feel like doing, the choosing, on an ordinary Tuesday, to be for your spouse instead of against them. Marriages are not usually saved in one dramatic scene. They are saved, or lost, in 10,000 small moments. And you have some of those moments in front of you tonight and tomorrow. Do not wait for a grand gesture, yours or theirs, to begin. The big romantic rescue, the tearful breakthrough conversation, the weekend away that fixes everything. Those make good movies, but real marriages mostly turn in the smallest, least cinematic ways. A cup of coffee made the way they like it without being asked. A genuine thank you for something you have stopped noticing. Choosing, in the middle of the old argument, to lower your voice instead of raising it. Putting the phone down when they walk in the room. None of these will feel like enough. Each one feels almost too small to matter against the size of what is wrong. But they are the actual stuff of which a turning is made, drop by drop, until one day there is water in a well that had been dry for years. Start small. Start tonight. Start with one, and brace yourself, gently, for the truth that rebuilding is rarely a straight line. It is not one good conversation and then sunshine forever. It is 2 steps forward and 1 step back. A tender breakthrough followed a week later by the same old fight. A day of real closeness, and then a cold spell that makes you wonder if anything changed at all. That zigzag is not failure. It is simply what healing looks like, in a marriage as in a body. A wound does not close in a single, clean moment. It knits slowly, and there are days it aches again, and you keep tending it anyway. So do not measure the whole future by a bad Tuesday. Do not let one relapse into the old patterns convince you the work is hopeless. Keep going through the setbacks. Keep coming back after the stumbles, and trust that the overall direction, over months and not minutes, is what matters. The couples who make it are not the ones who never slipped back. They are the ones who refused to let a slip backward become a reason to stop. And get the help. I will say it again because it is that important. Find a wise pastor, a good Christian counselor, a couple who has walked the hard road and come through. Do not let the secrecy that is strangling your marriage have the final word. The bravest thing a struggling couple ever does is to stop pretending and ask for help. And it is very often the thing that turns everything. There is no medal for going down with a marriage you were too proud to get help for. We do not think twice about calling a doctor for a body that is failing, or a mechanic for an engine we cannot fix. And yet somehow, we treat needing help for a marriage as a shameful admission, as though good Christians should be able to manage on their own. That is pride talking, and pride has buried more marriages than almost any sin. A good counselor is not a sign that your marriage is worse than everyone else's. It is a sign that you are taking it more seriously than most. And you do not need your spouse's agreement to begin. If they will go with you, wonderful. If they will not, go yourself, and let God begin His work in the one heart you can bring through the door. Help is not a last resort for the marriages too far gone. It is wisdom, and the sooner you reach for it, the more there is to save. And if you are doing all of this alone, if your spouse is not yet willing to fight, or to pray, or to go for help, and you feel like the only one rowing a boat that takes 2, then hear this before you give up in exhaustion. You are not responsible for the part that is theirs. You cannot repent for them, or soften their heart, or force them to come back to the table. Those are between them and God, and you can lay them down. What you can do is keep your own side faithful. Keep your own heart soft. Keep your own walk with God close. And keep praying for a person who may not even know you are praying. Sometimes a marriage is turned by one stubbornly faithful spouse who refused to give up while the other was still lost, and who kept the door open long enough for the other to find their way back through it. And sometimes, despite a faithful spouse doing everything right, the other still walks away. And if that happens, the failure is not yours. You will have loved well, and loving well is never wasted in God's economy, whatever the other person does with it. Carry your own end. Leave theirs, and the outcome in hands stronger than yours. Let me leave you with this, and then I will let you go back to that quiet house. The God we have been talking about looked at an unfaithful people, a people who had broken every promise and chased every other love. And instead of walking away, He said, I will betroth you to me forever, forever, after everything. That is the heart at the center of the universe, a love that goes yet and goes again and buys back what was lost and refuses to be finished even when every reasonable voice says it should be. That love made marriage. That love is woven through your story, even the parts that feel like wreckage. And that love is the third strand, waiting to be twisted into a cord that two tired people have been trying and failing to hold together on their own. I cannot tell you tonight how your marriage will end. Maybe it will be rebuilt into something stronger and truer than the thing you had before, the way it has been for so many who were sure it was over. Maybe the road ahead is harder and longer than you want it to be. But I can tell you, the one who is in the room with you, in that careful quiet, closer to the broken places than you are, and more committed to you than you have ever been to anyone. You are not alone in that house. You are not alone in this. And the God who specializes in raising what looked dead, who goes yet and goes again, is not nearly as finished as the silence in your home has led you to believe. May you find, in the days ahead, that the love you thought had died was only buried, and that things can grow again in ground that looked barren. May you be given the humility to start with your own heart instead of your spouse's, and the courage to let someone wise see the truth of where you are, and the strength to do the small, unglamorous things that mend a marriage one quiet act at a time. May you stop demanding from each other what only God can give, and find Him to be the third strand that holds when the two of you cannot. And if the road is long, may you not walk it alone. And if it is hard, may you be carried. And whatever the ending He writes, may you come through it knowing, in a way you never did before, how relentlessly you yourself are loved. So tonight, before you give up the whole of it, take one strand you can reach, your own heart, and put it back into His hands. Let Him do what neither of you can do alone. 2 strands fray and snap. 3 strands hold. The God who made your marriage is offering, tonight, to be the strand you have been missing, the one who can bear the weight that has been pulling the two of you apart. You do not have to be the strong one anymore. You do not have to hold it all together by yourself, or fix what only He can fix, or know how the story ends before you take the next step. You only have to stop trying to carry it alone and let the third strand take the strain. And whatever the morning brings, walk into it holding on to the one whose love has never once, in all of history, walked away from anybody who turned and reached for Him.